Welcome inside the Locked On NHL podcast for Tuesday, March 29th. I'm Ross Levitan from the Locked On Senators podcast alongside Mikey DiStefano from Locked On Leafs. So you know it's the Battle of Ontario edition of the show. We're going to look at the teams that added at the deadline, who stood out most. We're going to draft our top three each. Stay tuned for that. We're also going to touch on the Detroit Red Wings because when you make a historic effort defensively, or lack thereof, you deserve a little shout out. All that plus, as we do each and every Tuesday, we take a look at the power rankings and how we expect them to change going in to this week. This is the Locked On NHL podcast, your team every day.
Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making Locked On NHL your first listen on this Tuesday, March 29th. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts. As I mentioned off the top, I'm Ross Levitan. You can find me on Locked On Senators and Mikey DiStefano on Locked On Leafs. We got a great show ahead, lots to get into, but we got to start out with boots on the ground. Mikey, you were the assistant coach for the CHL Top Prospects game. I need, first of all, your day and how it all went, and then I need you to point out to me who stood out for you.
All right, so I don't even know where to start with the day. Like it was such a cool event. Like overall, like just getting the opportunity to, I guess, coach some of the best talent in the league. But like the day started out, just kind of showed up at the rink, and can we talk about how you're using a measuring glass as a cup right now?
I guess that's the cook in me, man. We just grab whatever we can, fill it up with water.
For those who are listening via podcast form, you got to go check it out on YouTube, the Locked On NHL YouTube channel. Ross just like nonchalantly took a swig out of like, what is that thing? That thing's got.
It's a half liter. It's a 500 milliliter or two cups for our American listeners.
That's got to be more than half a liter.
No, 2 cups, 16 ounces.
Yeah, 2 cups. Yeah, okay. So that's either way. That's real interesting. You got to go.
2 cups is 500 milliliters. Talk about getting off the rails right off the bat.
Yeah, really.
Who doesn't like holding a cup with a nice? Look at
I
this.
have a normal water bottle here. You're sitting there with.
Well, it's too normal, Mikey, because when we worked together at TSN, how many times did I grab yours accidentally when I had mine? So if I showed up with this kitchenware, I'd be all set.
I'm not even sold that this is my water bottle. It very well could be yours from years back. But to get back on the rails here,
first, the auditorium, like what a barn. You said you just went to the rink, but people who don't know the auditorium, that is as old school of a barn as you're going to find.
Yeah, that's a sweet rink. And I didn't get a chance to go into the Kitchener dressing room, though. Like that was the home team, and we came in. We were the visitors as Team White. And so I didn't get a chance to go in there, but I hear they got a hot tub cooking. I guess it wasn't available because I did ask the athletic trainer. I was thinking maybe try and sneak in there after morning skate, take a quick tub sesh. But I was told that it's out of commish due to COVID concerns. So
well, they probably thought they wouldn't have got you out in time for the game.
Probably not. I would have sat there for a full-on bake for at least 6 hours. You're correct. That is typically how my hot tub sessions go. But no, man, it was an awesome game, and like it was just a really good showing for the kids. TSN put on a really solid showing as well, and I had that one clip kind of go viral a little bit of me pumping up the boys pregame, and hey, Craig J said it set the tone, and you could tell early on that Team White just had a little bit more of an extra gear, and I like to think maybe my pump up had a little bit to do with that.
Maybe. They were out shooting Team Red, I think 25-5 at one point.
Man, I looked up at you're right. I looked up at the Jumbotron and I see that we were out shooting them. It was like 4 or 5 minutes left in the third period. And yeah, it was like 27-5 in shots. And I'm like, what the, like, I was kind of stunned to be honest. Cause on the other side was top prospect Shane Wright, the projected number 1 overall pick, but also like Matthew Savoy was on that team as well. Like 2 of the top prospects in the CHL, offensive prospect that is, and they were just limited to 5 shots. Now, Shane Wright did score on one of those 5 shots at that point in time, and he's a solid player, obviously, projected to be number 1. But I thought that my team, Team White, did a real solid job kind of shutting them down, and I think there's a few players on that squad that really helped their draft rankings going into the kind of the final stretch here in draft season.
Well, I tweeted out that you must have taught Jake Carabella that move on the breakaway. Unreal to go backhand and tuck it inside. But the player of the game, Jager Fergus, we got a lot of draft prep ahead, so I'm still in the early stages, but that is an all-time handle right there. And clearly the production matched it.
Clearly he's a kid from the dub with a name like that.
Oh,
Absolutely. That kid's awesome, man. And you talk about how impressed you were with Carabella's goal. He's a Guelph Storm prospect. But this kid, Jagger Furcus, just kind of went down the ice and made a couple of nice moves and then barred down, tucked it right underneath the bar over the goaltender. And these goalies these days are so big. I know you're a goaltender guy, but actually seeing these players when they're 6'5", 6'6", not on skates, and you see them, they get skates on, they're all padded up. It's you are monsters. I looked at this one kid on my team, Bo Pitt. I literally look at him God, they build you guys different these days. God, you're just a monster. But anyway, it was a terrific game. A couple of standouts, I guess. Jagger Furcus was one of those kids. Connor Geeky, who you'd be familiar with, being a Winnipeg guy right now, living out in the Peg, plays for the Winnipeg Ice. And defensively, I thought there was some really strong play from my squad, specifically Denton Matejchuk, who's, I believe, also Moose Jaw Warriors draft pick, or a player currently in the dub. Noah Warren from the Q, he played really well. But the guy who impressed me most, Tristan Luneau, I thought was fantastic. And, just a really smart player, right shot. He's got really good size, really smart plays he was making, just easy plays. And an overall great kid, vocal on the bench. Had some good coachability. O-Dog was chatting with him a little bit, telling him, some stuff that he can do to kind of help his game. And he seemed to adapt to it, and he was receptive to it. And then also very vocal, both on the ice and on the bench. So a good character kid. So that's somebody who I'll kind of have an eye on. And the couple of scouts that I've talked to stemming off that game, Craig Button being one of the best ones that I've chatted with, he says that he could be pushing Luneau from all the way up, potentially into that kind of bracket where he's got the top defenseman in the draft, the Matejchuks, who was also on our squad, and some of the other top players could end up in the top 10 in his next ranking, he says.
Well, Tristan Luneau, who's playing for the Gatineau Olympique in the Quebec League, he was a top draft pick for them, either first or second. I know they had 1-2 in the draft, much like Winnipeg Ice had 1-2, and they selected Savoy and Geeky, and now look at what they're doing. Guys are going to be in the top half of the first round. So that's awesome that you got an up close and personal view, and you're standing on the bench. Was Kilray on the bench? I'm seeing right here, another assistant coach. What an absolute legend. Did he have the stogie going? Because you see photos from back in the day. That guy just lives with it. But, man, what an absolute legend. Do you get a chat with him at all?
Absolutely. Brian Kilray, just such a hockey guy, through and through. One of the cool things about that experience was before the game, I was an assistant. I was a coach, right? I was a celebrity coach, so I got to go into the coaches' room. So you got Brian Kilray sitting there. He's just talking about what it was like traveling, being life in the 80s and 90s, and his time in the NHL, and all of these coaches going back and forth, sharing stories, and I'm just sitting there, just taking it all in, just soaking in, just not saying anything, just loving every second of it, just listening to these guys talk. And you just have such an appreciation for these guys, and it's clearly way ahead of my time and way ahead of our time, but it was just fun to kind of listen to them reminisce about some of their playing days, which was very long time ago for some of them, but then just their coaching days as well. It was overall an amazing experience, and I don't know, hopefully I get a chance to do something like that again. I mean, O-Dog and I were 1-0, and hey, I don't know, maybe there's a future in it for us. Who knows?
Hey, you did what you could, right? You took your opportunity, and you did just that. If anyone who doesn't know who Brian Kilray is, head coach of the Ottawa 67s for 32 years. This guy helped develop the likes of Denny Potvin, Doug Wilson, Logan Couture, and the like of them. Absolute legend in the game. And, well, there are a few more top picks to come. I know Vincent Roger, I think it was, from the 67s who took part in the game this year. And that has to do with all the teams at the bottom of the standings who pay a lot of attention to the top prospect game right now. Arizona with the best odds for the first overall pick, followed by Seattle, Montreal, Ottawa, and New Jersey to round out the top 5. But enough about the losers. You can follow Locked On Senators if you want to hear about all the draft previews and, of course, all the great Locked On shows that we have on our network. But on this show, we're going to focus in on the teams that added. And in the East, it was pretty much everybody. And we've now seen 2, 3, some 4 games with their new squad. So who stood out the most so far? And who do we think is going to make the biggest impact down the stretch? All that coming up along with a look at our power rankings. But first, a word from our friends at betonline.net, because we know betonline.net, they've been with us forever and they have great stuff on their website. You got to go see it for yourself. The odds, the futures. You can even bet on fun props like where the next fired coach is going to land at betonline.net. It's the best spot, as I say, number one in our hearts. And when you're betting on the underdog like I like to do, sometimes it goes the wrong way. But it's the key that you're in the action, and it's not just one sport. It's all sports, hockey, basketball, boxing, and UFC. You can get it all at betonline.net. So head to the website today or use your mobile device and learn more about the trends and action at betonline.net, where the game starts. All right, Mikey. So the games are starting fast and furious now down the stretch. Like 4 games a week is on average in the NHL for these teams right now. How are you keeping up with it? Let's start with the Toronto Maple Leafs, of course, your bread and butter.
How am I keeping up with watching all the games? It's tough to do. Let me tell you, it is tough to do. There's a lot of games here and not a lot of time. But, the Maple Leafs, they're in an interesting situation. I think for the first time in a long time, they woke up yesterday in a wild card position. Then they got the victory against Florida and moved back into a divisional race. But I mean, that's going to be a race in the East. Like we talk about how the 8 teams have been like solidified in general, but when you talk about where it's all going to shake out, this is going to be an interesting, 5 weeks, just gutting it out right to the end to see how seeding ends up playing out. And we'll see what ends up happening with Toronto. I mean, it's a tough sled, and they played Florida twice. They played Boston twice, and they also played Tampa twice. The teams in which they're all kind of jockeying for positioning, they'll play each other in the final month of the season too.
Yeah, no doubt. And it's not even, I mean, it's easy to just pick on the Toronto Maple Leafs. You look at the game against Montreal, they get 51 shots on goal, and they lose 4-2 to a team that had, 18 shots, I think Montreal had in that game. But it's as much a development from the Boston Bruins figuring it out. The second hottest team since the NHL, not trade deadline, but the NHL All-Star break, so bigger sample size. In their last 22 games, they have 15 wins and only 5 regulation losses. Only the Calgary Flames have been better. So the number one team in the Eastern Conference has been the Boston Bruins, who are sitting today, as we're recording, in a wild card position. So that's one squad that you don't really want to see peaking at the right time if you're an opponent.
No, and Toronto-Boston play tonight.
Okay.
So that'll be a big time game in at TD Garden. Nick Abruzzese could make his NHL debut. We'll see. He's a Harvard kid, so he's got Boston ties. So that'd be nice to see him be able to make his NHL debut there. But that'll be a big game tonight. I think that's the marquee matchup. Bruins Leafs with some playoff positioning on the line should be a fun one.
Yeah, if you're listening to this, you already know what happened. So that just puts a little extra oomph into what we're looking at here, which is the playoff picture.
No. It's tonight.
Oh, you're living in the future.
I'm living in the future.
Nice. I love it. You're
tonight,
a vet.
Ross.
You're a vet. That's why you're a celebrity coach right there, living in the future. That is going to be a huge night on Tuesday with the Leafs going up against the Bruins. Now, with the Leafs beating Florida on Sunday, does that give you a little more confidence? Is that who you're hoping to see now as the first round opponent for Toronto?
Is that who I'm hoping to see? No, I don't really hope to see any of these teams, to be honest.
You got to pick your poison. Toronto, or they're either getting Florida, Tampa, or Boston.
Yeah, well, they could end up getting Carolina, which also not a very, overwhelmingly makes me feel confident in that opponent either. But that was definitely a good win. I thought that was a fantastic win for the Maple Leafs. They played well. I feel like Toronto it's interesting. They've got all this talent, and they play a very they have all the skill in the world, I guess you could say, to play a run and gun style of hockey. But when you look at them and the way that they play, whenever they come up with a win against a big team, they usually just lock it down and play very low event hockey, and that's their way to win games. Like they just play, sound, solid defensive hockey, good 5-man unit out there on the ice, and try and shut things down, and then just allow their special teams and their special players to make plays at specific times. That's what we saw last night. They got 2 goals on the power play, and then they had a couple of special plays made by Mitch Marner to set up some more goals, and Morgan Riley scored as well, who's another special player, I would say, for the Maple Leafs. A lot is made about the core 4, but if we talk about a Fab 5, Morgan Riley gets tossed up into there. So definitely an encouraging victory. Considering that was the first game that the Leafs and Panthers played against each other is kind of astounding. We're into late March. Like we're almost into the final month of the NHL regular season, and they haven't played a division team yet. They still got 2 games to go, though. And keep in mind, it was Spencer Knight in net. There's no Aaron Ekblad in the game as well. And both teams were coming in on night 2 of it back-to-back. When both fully fresh, fully healthy, maybe a different type of game. But overall, I think you do have to be encouraged with the Maple Leafs stemming off of that, mostly because Peter Mrazek looked pretty good in that game.
Yeah, similar situations they were coming off of. Of course, Florida played my Senators on the Saturday and dominated the game, but it took a shootout for them to win, much like Toronto dominated Montreal on Saturday, but couldn't find that same result. Florida came back from a 3-0 early deficit in that game. Bobrovsky was phenomenal, too, when he had to be. So both teams have added Mark Giordano, Colin Blackwell are new on the Toronto Maple Leafs, Claude Giroux, notably with Ben Sherratt, new players on the Florida Panthers. So we're going to take a look at that right after another break. And also quickly, we got to mention, because I feel like the last time you and I recorded would have been 3 weeks ago now. Things have been busy with you on vacation and all of that. But the last time we spoke, I think it was like a 9-8 game between Detroit and Toronto. And now Detroit's giving up 11 goals. Like they're averaging more than 6 goals against over the last couple of weeks. It's unreal. And unsustainable too. Do you think somebody's got to be on the hot seat? Obviously, it's not upstairs. Stevie Y just got there, but I'm looking at a lot of Red Wings fans who are pretty upset with the head coach right now, who's been there through the entirety of this rebuild.
Yeah, you got to think that that's probably going to be the end of the road at the end of the season. I was surprised that he was actually retained when Yzerman even took over last year. So I think they know, like, he's almost a sacrificial lamb. We're rebuilding anyways. Why don't we just wait, get these kids going? And, there were some players that were coming up from Grand Rapids as well that he knew because he came from the Grand Rapids system. And perhaps that was a reason why they wanted to keep him around, because he was a good developmental coach. But I think once you get to a situation where they're ready to maybe take that next step, might not be next season, perhaps it's a season after. I think they know that there's a different coach who's going to take them to that. That'll take them to becoming more playoff viable team. Because I mean, how you go 2 games within like a 6-week span where you allow 10 and then 11 goals, that's just not good enough. Like clearly,
well, they also allowed 9 to Arizona, 8 to Chicago, and 7 to Toronto and Minnesota and Edmonton.
Remember how much, and I said this the second that trade went down, everyone was praising Alex Nedeljkovic or praising Steve Yzerman for getting Alex Nedeljkovic for like a 3rd-round pick this offseason. And I'm like, look, Nedeljkovic is not going to have anywhere near the sexy numbers that he had when he was with Carolina. He's going to a team that doesn't have very good players offensively, not much defensively as well, and they don't have a coach like Rod Brindamore either. So things aren't going to go as swimmingly for Nedeljkovic after the trade, and they've actually gone worse than I anticipated, to be quite honest with you. Like, he's been one of the worst goaltenders like over the course. He's in the last, I guess, since the All-Star break. Yeah, since the All-Star break, he's an .878 save percentage with a .414 goals against. Since the All-Star break, that's 15 games for him. So it's been a tough stretch for a lot of people in Detroit, but the goaltending has been an issue there as well.
Yeah, allowing nearly 5 goals against per game since January 25th. That is unsustainable at any level. but especially the National Hockey League. I'm actually shocked that in that stretch they have 8 wins in 24 games because it should be way lower than that. All right, that's just a little news. A note should mention as well there, Pittsburgh, the first team since Washington in 2003 to score 11 goals in a single game. A lot of teams have gotten 10, maybe not a lot, but teams had gotten to 10 before, but nobody to that magic number 11. Hey, so the other day I was riding in my car. Of course, Winnipeg still a little bit colder, and I got right off into a ditch. It was absolutely brutal. But you know what? I was able to call Rock Auto, and they fixed up all the parts I needed. If you were going to go to Rock Auto, where would you check it out?
Yeah, you go to Rock Auto. With the ever-increasing numbers of makes and models, it's now impossible for your local chain auto parts stores to stock all the parts you need. So why endure often pointless and seemingly intimate questions and wait while the person behind the counter orders parts on their computer, choosing the only brand their warehouse happens to carry? You got computers with access to rockauto.com at home and in your pocket. You can save time and money when using Rock Auto. And Rock Auto, it's a family business serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. They're reliably low prices for every customer. They have everything you could need from brake parts to tail lamps, motor oil, and even new carpet. Go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck. And write Locked On in their How'd You Hear About Us box so that they know that we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts the car will ever need. Visit rockauto.com.
Ross Levitan here from the Locked On Senators podcast alongside Mike DiStefano from Locked On Leafs. Thanks for making us your first listen of the day. We're free and available everywhere you get your podcast. Make another Locked On show your second listen of the day. We've got great hosts covering all the teams, all the action, and your local angles, just like we had the play-by-play voice of the North Dakota Fighting Hawks on our show because the 5th overall pick, Jake Sanderson, just came out of school. I was actually surprised, Mikey. He's the final top 10 pick from that draft to sign. And it's that recent. So, of course, went back, had some unfinished business after that 5 overtime loss in the tournament last year, but then some injuries pushed that down this year. All that to say, there's players coming up in different ways, but for the contenders, most of these players came from other teams. So let's get in, or you want to hit on that first?
Before we get into it, we got to have a discussion about the number that he decided to use when he's called up to the Ottawa Senators.
Yeah.
Number 85?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, it's a strange one. I'm waiting to hear what his explanation is. Now, the funniest part of all this is they had the 3rd and 5th overall pick in the draft. They have one number that's retired from the original Ottawa Senators, and both players would have had that as their number 1 choice. Number 8, it's retired for Frank Finnegan because, of course, he was a legend in town. Wasn't even the best player on the team when they had it. He was the only guy who was alive when they got the team, and they wanted someone to be there for the ribbon cutting ceremony and like the welcome in. And then, I mean, rest in peace. He passed away between then and opening night, so he didn't even get to drop the puck. That was the whole plan. They're going to put the number up in the rafters and all that. But no Senator has ever worn number 8. And ironically, there's only been 6 players in NHL history to wear 85, and one of them is semi-active for the Senators. Restricted free agent Vitaly Abramov, who's over in the KHL. So he just went zoink. I'll take that. But yeah, it's a strange one. But Mikey, Sens fans will tell you that everyone thought 65 was weird when Erik Karlsson came up in 2009 wearing it, and he made it his own number. So it's a big boxy number with the 8 and the 5. So what I've said is he wanted to get the 8 in there, and then he was the 5th overall pick. I don't know. I'm probably getting a little too big into the mental gymnastics, but
maybe in 58 would have made a little bit more sense, you know?
Yeah.
It's David Savard, number 58. So there's, familiarity with defensemen with that number. 85 is such a bizarre. I always think of tight ends. Like it's football tight ends. That's who wears 85. Antonio Gates. That's who wore number 85. Not defenseman. But hey,
I would have just pigeon tossed Eric Brandstrom and taken his number 26 he wore at North Dakota. And just been like, hey, I'll get you a watch or something. We'll call it even. But yeah, 85, it's certainly unique, but they need defensemen. So I don't care what number he's wearing. If he can play good, he's in the lineup as far as I'm concerned. But again, he's hurt right now. So what a tease. But they're used to it because remember last year, players who would sign from out of college, they'd have to quarantine for 2 weeks. So I'm just considering this is just the extra little quarantine effort. But Thomas Chabot's out for the rest of the year, so it'd be nice those two watching practice over the next couple of weeks and get the systems lined up and everything. But he's a hell of a prospect. 45 points in 41 games for North Dakota during his career in college. 41 points, 45 games, the exact same points per game as Cale Makar had in his 2 seasons. Different defenseman. I don't think Sanderson's going to be scoring 24 goals. That's unreal what Cale Makar is doing, but he might not even be the Norris favorite anymore. Let's just quickly, I know we'll save it for Thursday with the Western Conference guys, but like, has Roman Josi not only entered the conversation, but become the favorite?
I don't know if he's become the favorite. Last I checked at BetOnline, it was still Cale Makar and Roman Josi's about plus 260.
I'd sprinkle on that.
It might be worth a sprinkle. I mean, this is a guy who's he's on pace for 100 points. 100 points. The guy leads the NHL in the last 12 games or something like that with 26 or 27 points in his last 12 games. Leads the NHL since that time in the last month.
He's on a 13-game point streak, Mikey. 13-game point streak where he has 28 points in his last 13 games.
As a defenseman, it's insane. So, yeah, he's definitely worked himself into it. Has he worked himself into the Hart conversation as well? I don't know, but I think it's a worthy conversation. Maybe they'll have that on tomorrow's edition of the Locked On NHL Western Conference show.
Yeah. But with that, though, I mean, Mikey, he's 14 points clear of the next guy on his team. I think that has to be.
Is he not 7th in the NHL in scoring?
Oh, he's got to be right up
he's
there.
He's top 10 in the NHL, period.
He's number 10 in the NHL right now. He's tied with Kirill Kaprizov. So think of the electricity that Kaprizov's brought all year. Tied in points. Unreal. Yeah. Unreal season for Roman Josi. We're seeing some great efforts by a lot of defensemen this year. So credit to them. I love watching these guys get active up into the rush. I might even have one on the list we're about to get into as we're going to talk about which impact players are going to make the biggest splash on their new teams. Mikey, I'll let you go first, buddy.
Oh, you're giving me first pick. Are we doing a snake or are we going?
You pick. You're coming back from vacation. You're feeling good. You got the victory at the CHL Top Prospects game. It's your world, buddy. You tell me where you want to go.
Well, here's the thing. I don't feel comfortable saying to do a regular draft and then also taking first overall pick. So, you got to make the decision. If you're giving me first, then you got to make the decision on whether or not you want to snake it, which I assume you would want to.
I would like to snake it.
That's probably why you gave me first overall pick. You're not really being a good guy. You're being a bit of a scumbag here. You're trying to snake 2 and 3. I know what you're doing, but I'll take it. First round pick. The number one guy. So what we're doing is it's almost like a power ranking, but we're making a draft about guys who we feel will be most impactful with their clubs, down the stretch as the playoffs loom and then into the playoffs. So for me, I think number one's got to be Claude Giroux. And what Claude Giroux is going to do for this team out in Florida, and what he's already done, he's got 4 points in just a couple of games here for the Florida Panthers up on the top line. But what he's going to bring to this team, into this locker room, an accomplished guy. He hasn't won the Stanley Cup, but he's made a run to the Stanley Cup final. Did that years ago when he was a young pup against the Chicago Blackhawks. But it's a guy who's played over 1,000 games in the NHL and, almost, was he 900 points or so in those 1,000 games? He's an extremely productive player on both ends of the ice. He's versatile. He can play the wing. He can play down the middle. He can play on the power play. And I feel like Giroux is going to be a big-time addition here for the Florida Panthers in come playoff time.
I mean, he was against Ottawa in the game that I got to see on Saturday night. He's an unbelievable talent, and he just fits in so well with Barkov on that top line alongside Carter Verhaeghe. He would have been my first overall pick as well, so that's a bit of a no-brainer. I'm going to go a little bit off the board because it's a team that we discussed needed to add something, and I don't think it was namely a big enough splash to get everyone's attention. But Andrew Kopp has points in every game he's played at the New York Rangers. 5 points in 3 games. He's one of those toolkit guys who can play up and down the lineup, kill penalties, be on the power play. And not only that, but he's an arbitration-eligible RFA who's playing for his next contract, which I assume he expects to be a long-term deal. He's playing on a line with Artemi Panarin, so any of you fantasy hockey guys out there, if he's available in your league, get on it right now. Playing right wing, he can play center as well. He is just your do-it-all type of guy, and the Rangers are going to use him as such. So I got Andrew Kopp as my first pick. I think he's the type of player too, Mikey, that these are the kind of guys that make impacts in the playoffs. I think we could have a big overtime goal or something to push them over the top.
Yeah, he was somebody who I had ranked in my top 5. I didn't have at number 2, so you went a little bit earlier than I was anticipating. But he was somebody who would have come off the board with one of my next 2 picks. But who do you take with the 3rd overall selection, Ross?
Yeah, this one I'm a little bit more nervous about just because I might be going off the board again a little bit. But, and maybe I'm putting too much stock into the
You're Pierre Dorian. You're Pierre Dorian here.
I know. I am. But they paid a hefty price to get him, so maybe it's not so crazy. But Rickard Rakell had 3 points in his last game. It took him a couple games to get the ball rolling with his new team, but he's alongside of Evgeny Malkin, who had a hat trick, a few of those assisted by Rakell. So you know that the Penguins just have a way of bringing people into their culture, and they just produce. And yeah, it helps when you have 87 and 71 down the middle. But I think that he's going to be a perfect fit for a team that just needed a little bit more punch. I think their goaltending has been fantastic this year. When you look at what Tristan Jarry's done, they just, much like the Rangers, these are two teams that they just need a little bit more offense, and it was an arms race to get it at the deadline. And I like Rickard Rakell, and I think that this is only scratching the surface, that 3-point night, with what he's going to do towards the playoffs and into it.
Yeah, it's almost like the Rakell deal for Pittsburgh was a late one, really late.
Yep.
Seemed like it was almost a response to the Rangers going out and getting Andrew Kopp. And it was like, okay, they're loading up. We got to go out and we got to make this deal happen. So it's almost as if Brian Burke, I'm sure they were talking to Anaheim about Rakell, but weren't sure if they wanted to give up the hefty price it took. And then once they saw Kopp kind of go off the board, and then they got Tyler Mont, like, okay, we need to do something. And they finally pulled the trigger on Rickard Rakell. That's how I viewed that situation. I could be totally wrong and blowing smoke, but reading between the lines, it's almost what it seemed like. All right, I got the next 2 picks here, which I guess will pretty much finish me out on this draft here. I'm going to go Mark Giordano as my next one here. I had Rickard Rakell actually as my 3rd pick myself, so that's exactly where I had him as well. But I had Giordano as my number 2 pick, so I ended up getting my top 2 picks here.
Wow, you look really Kyle Dubasing this draft, eh?
I know, right? I know, but listen. You go and you watch what Giordano has done for this team in the last 3 games. Sheldon Keefe, after last night's win over Florida, said, this team has played maybe their best 3 defensive games the last 3 games, and he doesn't believe that is an accident since the last 3 has been with Mark Giordano in the on the team on the ice. So, they bring in Giordano, which is something that they desperately needed. A good veteran defenseman who just plays the right way, can play in both ends in all situations, is hard in front of the net, and just like the leadership that he also brings off the ice. But what I really appreciate about Giordano is kind of the flexibility that he allows this Leafs blue line to have. Because now you look at it, he's playing really, really well on the 3rd pair, mind you, but he's really elevated Timothy Liljegren's game. And we know that Giordano can elevate people alongside of him. But if that pairing can get going, Justin Hall and TJ Brody have been really good. And as have Riley and Lyubushkin. You still have Jake Muzzin to factor in once he gets back. You also still have Rasmus Sandin at some point. Now all of a sudden you have depth and you have flexibility. You've got guys who can move over to the right. Like Sandin has been able to move over onto the right. TJ Brody, we know, can move over to the right. And you also have quality guys who can play in your top 4 as well. So I think Giordano will have quite a bit of impact for this club down the stretch.
Yeah, I like that pick for sure, Mikey. That's solid. So who are you going with for your 3rd?
You tell me. Do you want me to go off the board, or you want me to go easy and safe?
Go off the board, man. I set the tone with that, so have some fun.
I'll go off the board, and you're going to hate it. You're going to hate it so much. I love the Nick Paul edition.
That's
for the
good.
Tampa Bay Lightning. Nick Paul, I know it wasn't for much, a 3rd-round pick, and he's a depth guy, but...
Oh, they got Matthew Joseph out of that trade.
Oh, that's true. They did get Matthew Joseph as well. A
little upside, but if you're taking those 2 players straight up, it's Nick Paul. But expiring contract, they get 3 years of extra control with Joseph, and they got a 4th rounder in that
this
one
isn't the
no, but if you're going to say that...
podcast here, Ross, all right?
No, but we're trying to be accurate on Locked On NHL. Didn't go for a 3rd-round pick.
You're right. But Nick Paul is a player who basically he didn't go for as much as people thought he might go for. And I thought he was going to stay in Ottawa, to be quite honest with you. But he goes to Tampa Bay. And I think that is going to be a big time addition for them because Tampa Bay, you saw what were able to do the last couple of years. It's that they come after you wave after wave after wave. We already know that top six is just absolutely stacked. Like, unbelievable. You've got Point, you've got Kucherov, you got Stamkos, you got Palat, you've got Killorn, you've got Cirelli, and like there's just everybody out there can score goals and can play the game the right way. And then you add, Nick Paul, because that third line that they had in Tampa really got decimated over the offseason, whether it was Yanni Gourde, or they also had to move on from Tyler Johnson, and they had to move on. Blake Coleman left, and also Barclay Goodrow. So that was like 4 depth pieces, bottom 6 pieces that were gone. They've completely rebuilt it. And I think Nick Paul brings a nice element back to that third line that can help that bottom 6. So I really, really think that Nick Paul, and he's a guy too who can score a timely goal. We saw it happen at the World Championships this year for Team Canada. And you talk about what, you do in the playoffs, those unsung heroes. I feel like Nick Paul could be that if the Lightning go for that three-peat and go on a long playoff run.
Yeah, no doubt. Would you have paid what he wanted as a re-sign? He wanted 4 years at $3 million per.
I think I would have paid that.
As a 28-year-old with a career-high 20 points.
But what's he got this year?
He's got 19 points in 64 games.
So he's going to surpass that. Look,
it's a lot of term.
I would have, because I don't think Ottawa's not a team that's going to be up at the cap.
But they have their own cap. So the cap doesn't really matter when you're trying to figure out Josh Norris's next contract.
But I also look at it like he's a guy who could wear a letter for you. And I think
he did.
That's what I mean. And going forward even, I think that's worth paying a guy $3 million alone. Someone who's going to wear a letter for you and be a representative for your club, both on the ice and off the ice, in the locker room, within the fan base. I think that also is worth money. And I think that I probably would have given him the 4x3. I think so.
Yeah. That's fair. I feel like just Sens fans have been burned before because Zach Smith got basically the same contract. He got 4 by 3.25.
Yeah.
And that was after a 25 goal season, not a 20-point season. And next thing you know, they were moving on from that contract before it was even done. They couldn't get out of it fast enough. He was on waivers even after. Not saying that's the kind of player Nick Paul is. I actually like the choice. I think that he's a great player. We always say in Ottawa, Nick Paul does it all. I think Connor Brown coined that for him. He's probably, to me, a poor man's Andrew Kopp. Like he doesn't have the amount of offensive ability as Kopp, but still, any situation, great penalty killer, long body. This guy's like 6'4", 6'5", big kid. I think he's going to fit in really well. Scored in his first game with Tampa, but hasn't done much since. And I hope he does great because he's not going to get the same amount of ice time. It's already down 6.5 minutes from what he was playing in Ottawa per game. So he's not getting the top 6 minutes or the power play time that he was getting a bit of in the nation's capital. So I'll be interested to see, but I like that pick, Mikey, because he is the kind of guy that can score a timely goal. As you pointed out, the gold medal clinching goal at the World Championships last spring. Well, not only are we locked on Senators, which means I care about Nick Paul, and we want to see him do well, our Sens abroad that we follow along, which you can make a whole team of, but we're also a goalie-friendly show. So to finish off the draft, I got to go with Marc-Andre Fleury, another guy.
Marc-Andre Fleury is a Western Conference player. We got to.
We're only doing East. All right. All right.
I would have taken the flower way earlier if that was.
You would have, eh?
Oh,
okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I don't want to go back to the same team, but I can't. You know what? I do, because they needed to add, and it's my squad. If you heard it a few weeks ago, we were talking futures. How about Frankie Vatrano? 3 goals in 3 games since coming to the Rangers. Another Swiss Army knife, man. Up and down the lineup.
When you said it's my squad, I thought you were referring to the Ottawa Senators.
Oh, my God.
I thought you were going to say Travis Hamonic.
No way.
I thought you were going to say Hamonic, and I was going to say, you're fired. Like, we got to
end the show.
Get this guy off the show. What the hell are you talking about?
No,
okay. Frankie Vatrano scored a couple goals last night, too.
Yeah, he's got 3 and 3 since coming to 3 and 3 since coming to the Rangers. And again, like the Rangers have their stars. They have Zibanejad, they have Panarin. Strome to an extent is a sick player. And Kreider's got 40 goals. So they just need complementary players that can plug and play on different lines. And in case of an injury, can move up and down the lineup. And I think Frankie Vatrano is that type of guy. He cost them nothing. He cost them, a 4th round pick or something? And I think he's going to be a sick addition to them. And he plays that New York style too. Like he's not afraid to mix it up a little bit either. So they need to do something. When you have the goalie playing as well as Shesterkin, you got to give your team the best chance to win. And when you only have to pay that little of a price, yeah, they missed out on Giroux, although Giroux, by all accounts, only wanted to go to the Florida Panthers. So, yeah, I'm going to have to go back to him for Frankie Vatrano here with the Rangers. Right now, he's just playing he's playing alongside Zibanejad and Kreider. So, again, Poolies, talk about putting guys in situations to succeed. They just added in their lineup at least 2 top 6 forwards. So, I love what the Rangers did.
And you talk about the Rangers and the superstars. One that you left out was someone who hasn't quite hit that yet, but he's expected to be one. That's Alexila Freniere. And he's on a 6-game point streak.
Yes, he is.
He's got 7 points in those 6 games, scored in back-to-back games, and assisted last night on the overtime winner as well when they beat the Buffalo Sabres. But he's a guy, too. She's just not getting enough ice time. Still, he's been under 15 minutes of ice time pretty much like the entire season. And for someone who you're expecting to be a number 1 pick, a superstar in this league, you should probably bump those numbers up. Those are rookie numbers.
No doubt. And, man, Chris Drury is looking like a genius because even Tyler Mott's put up some good performances, and they got him from Vancouver's scrap heap.
Yeah, I've always been a big Tyler Mott guy. I considered putting him on the lineup. If we did like a 5-pack, I would have had Tyler Mott in here. I think someone else who just missed out, which we probably should have in here. He was going to be my pick, but I went off the board. I mean, what Lindholm's going to do for Boston, I think, will be big as well.
Yes.
Like, he'll have a massive impact on the Boston blue line. You talk about them being one of the best teams in the league since the All-Star break. Then you add in someone to help that blue line. Jeremy Swayman, by the way, has been unbelievable since Tuukka Rask retired. Something like 12-1-1 since like Tuukka Rask retired, or 11-1-1. Which is just incredible for a rookie goaltender. But Lindholm's going to do big things for them. Brandon Haggle was another pretty solid addition by the Tampa Bay Lightning. They gave up 2 firsts and 2 prospects to bring him in. So you'd think that he'll get an opportunity in their middle 6 and have a chance to continue on to his career year. Was there anyone else who you think we maybe left out of our consideration for the Eastern side of things?
I got my picks in for sure, but
Yeah.
that to say, I do really like that you shouted out Hampus Lindholm. I think that it just takes so much pressure off of Charlie McAvoy as well. He doesn't have to do as much defensive work, and we could see his offensive numbers explode because of it. Hampus Lindholm's just been a reliable guy in Anaheim year after year. And yes, I know plus minus isn't everything, but what's he in his career? I think he's like plus 79 or plus 80, and he hasn't always played on the best teams even down there. So I think that that's going to unlock some potential with Charlie McAvoy. Now, on the other hand, like I'm still shaking my head that Washington, they either just didn't think it was their year or what, but they just watched all this happen and they got to play against one of these teams. And you know what? Carolina to the same token, like sure, Max Domi, I guess. You're not getting the Max Domi that scored 30 goals a few years ago. This is a different player right now.
Yeah, I don't. They didn't give up. They literally gave up nothing to get Max.
Right.
They gave up. I think it was a 3rd-round pick in 2020. The prospect that they gave up to get him, who knows? He could turn into something. But as of this point, it's not a big name. It wasn't a hefty price to pay, which I thought was really surprising for Domi. But often, I think we get too lost in the one season he had in Montreal and his name. Right, like we just the name Domi has so much like credence in the hockey community, but at the end of the day, he has not been a very good player the last couple of seasons, and I think he's only playing like 12, 13 minutes in Carolina right now, like on their 4th line. So I don't know. We'll see how much he ends up getting in terms of I guess like opportunity in Carolina. Do we quickly want to do like give me a team that's rising, give me a team that's fallen before we head out here?
Yeah, for sure. Let me just pull up here. Oh, well, I mean, the easy fruit here is I still think the Boston Bruins need to be higher. We just talked about it. It's over a month and a half now where they've been the best team in the Eastern Conference, yet they're still the Rangers, the Lightning, the Penguins, the Hurricanes, and the Panthers all ahead of them on the power rankings. Like that doesn't add up for me. So as much as I love my New York Rangers, I've been putting on the pom-poms for them this episode and in past ones. I still think the Bruins should be jumping them. They should probably jump Tampa even, and the Panthers I still think are above them. Carolina's still looking good, although Carolina hasn't been winning at the same clip that they were earlier on in the season. And man, I know it's the Western Conference. We'll leave it to the boys, but that Calgary-Edmonton game was absolutely insane the other night on Saturday. So I don't know what I'm doing with Calgary, because on one hand they scored 9 even strength goals. On another hand, they were on the ropes there for a little bit. Every time they'd get ahead by 2, they'd allow 1. But I think that my riser quickly is going to be the Boston Bruins.
Yeah, I think that was going to be my riser as well. I can see them leaping up a couple of spots. The faller, probably a team that's not really doing much this year, but you talked about Edmonton allowing a lot of goals the other night. What about Detroit allowing a lot the other night? 11 goals against the Pittsburgh Penguins. They're currently slotted at 24th in the NHL. I could see them taking a couple of slides down the power rankings. It's not a fun pick, but that's a team also that's really, they've hit a tough stretch over the last little bit after a decent start to the season. Looked like the young kids were going to have the Detroit Red Wings somewhat in the mix, but it's quickly started to fade here down the stretch once you get to go time here as the playoffs loom.
Yeah, and even though they're still a little higher than I'd like, so my follower would be the Washington Capitals, still an extra spot or two. Like Nashville's coming on. I think Nashville could jump them. Dallas has been kind of hit or miss, but I still like them. Winnipeg's quietly been number 3 in the league since the All-Star break. It goes Calgary, Boston, and then Winnipeg, and they're still sitting at like 18 or 19 on our power rankings.
18th,
yeah. So sticking with the East, these are teams that they would fall past if it's the Washington Capitals, who since the All-Star break are 20th out of 32 teams. So they made such a huge push at the start of the year to gain all that ground, and now they're just giving it away. So they're lucky they did all that work at the start of the year, because it hasn't been going their way as much recently.
All right, one question. We'll leave it off with this one, and this will
Yes, sir.
maybe lead into the conversations that will be had on tomorrow's Western Conference edition of the Locked On NHL podcast. Vegas, yes or no, they make the playoffs?
I was actually about to say that Vegas had the best deadline acquisition in Evgeny Dadonov, 5 points in 2 games. How about that, since he had that trade vetoed? But I'm going to say no. I think that not only is Winnipeg playing great hockey overall, despite the loss to the Senators on Thursday, not a big deal, but the Dallas Stars have 4 games in hand on Vegas right now, who's sitting in that second wildcard spot. And I just see them as too talented to give it up. Now, I know that Ottinger's been carrying the mail for them big time, with Holtby hurt, and then Khudobin, even though he was sent down, then got hurt. They couldn't even call him back up. So I'm curious to see how long Holtby's going to be out for. But to me, it's either Dallas or Winnipeg, and I lean heavily towards Dallas. Those games in hand, it's too easy to see that and not be like, okay, well, there's too much talent there that they're not going to be able to push it over the top.
Yeah, if I had to pick one of those two, I think definitely I'd take Dallas over Vegas for the wild card. But I mean, Edmonton's not fully secured into that position either. They're only 1 point up on Vegas, but they do have 2 games in hand. Vancouver's not out of it either. They got 73 points in 67 games. I mean, they got a game in hand. If they win that, they're only 1 point back of Vegas too. So Vancouver, Winnipeg, Dallas, Vegas, and probably Edmonton, I think, are the final, we'll say, 5 teams that are battling for 2 playoff spots there. I think the rest probably pretty well have it wrapped up, unless some sort of catastrophe kind of goes down. Winnipeg or Minnesota, winners of 6 straight as well. So maybe they will climb up the rankings this week as part of the Western Conference. Good chat, Ross, and
always, buddy.
Fun Tuesday as always.
Absolutely. As Mikey said, you can follow Locked On NHL. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and that's the beauty of the network. It's local experts on the biggest stories with different personalities each day on Locked On NHL. And if you want to check out each show, like Locked On Leafs with Mikey DiStefano or Locked On Senators, you can do that wherever you get your podcasts, including on YouTube, where you might even get a view. I think my dog just walked behind. So if you like dogs, how's that for a sales pitch? You like dogs? Go listen to the show. But Mikey, it's a pleasure as always.
Yeah.
And if you want to see my container.
The Pyrex freaking liquid container there. What do they call it? Measuring cup?
Yes.
Glass measuring cup there. Yeah.
Yeah.
2 cup. That's amazing.
Talk about knowing your intake, buddy. Oh man, I'm gonna fill this up with some adult juice a little bit later, but thanks for listening today's show, and to make sure that you make another Locked On show your second listen of the day. Mikey and I will be back next Tuesday, and we got some special up our sleeve. So thanks again for listening, and stay locked on, because we've got your team every day.